Hello and welcome to the Magic of Fishing. Today you join me in Yorkshire. At last I'm doing a video in my home county of South Yorkshire, God's own county, and I'm at the magnificent DAMFLASK Reservoir, about 5 or 6 miles outside of Sheffield city centre, the Steel City and my hometown. In fact, after calling in at a tackle shop to get some bait for today's session, I managed to stop by Hillsborough, just taking the site for a few moments before driving out into the beautiful Peak District, which is where this wonderful, wide open and wild reservoir is based, or is situated. It's actually been supplying water to Sheffield since I was a little kid, and I probably drank the stuff in this huge body of water as a young kid, and I certainly fished on the banks of this brilliant res growing up a lot. This is a real pilgrimage for me to come back here. It's quite emotional, and for whatever reason I've not got around to doing a video anywhere north of the Trent since I launched the Magic of Fishing a couple of years ago. I don't know why that is, but it's probably because, possibly because, I come up to Sheffield to fish matches with my old childhood club that my granddad signed me up to when I was just 4 or 5 years old, Dronfield Woodhouse Sports and Social Club. And I'm still coming up, as anyone who's read my book will know, I still come up here every summer to fish 4 or 5 matches with the club. There's only about 10 of us left now. And we've got one tomorrow on Saturday. We're off to Springvale Lakes, brilliant fishery in Nottinghamshire, and we'll hopefully have a grand day out. But today I've got the day off, it's Friday, stopping at my dad's, and this morning he was making up a packed lunch to go out walking with his mates, and I didn't need much more of an excuse to come back to this old stomping ground where I really learnt to fish. I took my fishing to a whole new level here. I mean, my granddad got me into this amazing sport, and again, if you've read the book, you'll know that I did my apprentice on a tiny farm pond in Derbyshire that I called the Pond, and then graduated to the river, which was the River Derwent, again just outside the city. But when I was a young teenager, I came down here onto the banks of DAMFLASK to the boathouse actually, which I've just come past, fishing here for old time's sake. This is where we used to fish a lot of our matches and trials for the Sheffield Juniors. But it was that boathouse where I came down as a young lad to try out for the Sheffield Juniors squad, and by some miracle managed to make it into that squad. And we were taught by some brilliant anglers from Sheffield and from the Barnsley Blacks team. People like Jim Baxter, who's sadly no longer with us, RIP Jim, Tony Stones and Dave Hodgkinson. Brilliant bunch of blokes who gave up all their time to teach a really budding young group of anglers how to fish difficult wild waters like this, and indeed rivers like the River Trent and Nene. So such fond memories of this place. It really has put a bit of a lump in my throat coming back here, especially on such a beautiful day. It's a stunning place to walk or fish, or just to come and sit. But it is notoriously tricky. I've not fished it for 20 years, so I'm going to have to find out whether it's any easier than it used to be when I last fished it, or I'm in for a hard day. But what a place to have any kind of a fishing session, eh? And this place is so special to me that it features in my book, The Magic of Fishing, of course. Chapter 11, The Dynamic Duo, which is about how and my old fishing mate Andy met on the banks of DAMFLASK while we were trying out for the Sheffield Juniors team. And rather than try and describe this marvellous place off the cuff, I thought I'd read you a little bit. The first ever reading of the book on the channel. The Dynamic Duo. DAMFLASK Reservoir covers more than 100 acres and is 80 feet deep in places, making it a beautiful or intimidating sight depending on the prevailing conditions. Today I've gotten pretty good. There's the usual strong wind blowing down, but lovely blue skies and white clouds. Over 1 million gallons of peat-tinged liquid is contained by a sloping dam wall that was built over the ruins of a village destroyed in the Great Sheffield Flood of 1864. One balmy evening in the 1980s, my dad was picking his way over the rock-strewn shoreline looking for me. He was actually walking along some exposed lake bed, perhaps because being near the huge body of water helped him feel a touch cooler. As he scanned the horizon, the reservoir was still evaporating and being consumed by the city at an alarming rate, thanks to an enduring heat wave that was now in its 3rd week. He'd just passed the sailing club, feeling mildly frustrated because it had been a good 20-minute drive to get there, and he'd already been walking for a further 10 when he noticed a lone fisherman. Dad changed tack, and when they were only a short distance apart, he veered up onto the track and greeted him, before asking whether he'd seen 2 young lads who'd also been fishing. "Oh aye," replied the man with a knowing smile, "the Dynamic Duo." He jerked his thumb over his shoulder before wiping sweat from his brow, and he confirmed we could be found still fishing just a bit further along the shore. That was Andy's uncle, who was a really great fisherman, still is a great fisherman, and he was also someone who helped us to understand how to try and catch fish from such a huge expanse of water, as I say, up to 80 feet deep in places. But it's brilliant to be back here fishing somewhere near where me and Andy would have been in the very chapter in this book. So let's get cracking. So how do you go about fishing such a wild place as DAMFLASK, even on a sunny late May day like this? Well, there's all kinds of ways to fish it, and no doubt people have very good days on here with pole and feeder, even bomb. But I am keeping it old school in honour of the way we used to fish it when I were a lad, and that is on the waggler. Quite a heavy peacock waggler, insert tip from my mate Andy at Black Bottom Floats. Brought it all the way up from Surrey, where I've now lived for over 25 years for anyone who's new to the channel. But waggler was always the way we were taught to fish this water as young lads, and rather than just watching a float at the end of a rod on a tiny pond like the one I used to fish as a little boy, this was where I really learnt to fish big open waters, just like I would go on to learn how to fish big wild rivers like the Trent. I have to watch out for these ducklings. But because there's always a bit of a crosswind on the Flask, well, apart from the very calmest of summer evenings, you fish it a bit like a clock face. You start by casting up to the right into the wind. And because there's so much natural tow, even with couple of foot of hook length on the bottom, which is what I've set up to do today, just a few droppers down the line so I can catch on the drop if there's any fish higher up in the water. Now that float's just about settled, it's right in front of me, and I'll probably then get another 2 or 3 minutes most as the rig gradually drags through the swim and the bait trips across the bottom, and you're really looking to try and hold that rig in place for as long as possible. And with all the ripples or the little waves you get on this venue, your tip, once it's dotted down, can sometimes disappear between each wave. And I still remember the excitement of realising that when it disappeared and didn't show after the next wave, that meant you'd got a bite, and it was usually roach, perch, the odd skimmer, even a few chub. And I'm probably, well, I'm a good half a mile up the bank from the dam end, which some of you may recognise one of my dad's pencil sketches of from the book. And the lake just keeps on going up to the right, up to what we call the neck end, where it really narrows down, and the river that feeds it, the River Loxley, comes into it. We're in the Loxley Valley, and it's really breathtaking. I mean, I'm lucky enough to fish some fantastic, beautiful venues down south. You know, estate lakes and little rivers meandering through the countryside. But there's not really anywhere to top this kind of scenery. And it feels fantastic to be back. It's not somewhere to feed too heavily, and I've bought a pint of casters, pint of red maggots and good old faithful hemp, and I'll just be feeding little and often to see whether we can attract the nomadic, sometimes sparse fish that live along the shoreline. And it really was here that I was taught to fish with a lot more finesse than I had done in the past. The water is really clear, as you might expect in a reservoir that's used for drinking water. It's really deep, and it's got a little peaty tinge to it. It looks almost like a cup of black tea. And yeah, today I'm fishing 3-pound mainline with a 2-pound bottom down to a small 22 Hawk spade end that I've whipped on. And I don't think that would have embarrassed me in front of the coaches of the juniors squad, but certainly back then 2-pound mainline and 1-pound hook length was more the norm. Sometimes we fished down to 12-ounce or even 8-ounce Bay of Pearl on hook lengths just to try and buy a bite in difficult conditions. I mean, you imagine trying to fish this in winter if you think it looks a bit open and featureless today. Now, there's no beds of reeds or lilies to cast at. It's just acre upon acre of open water. So you have to think about the features underwater, and I've plumbed up to find about 7 or 8 foot of depth, but I'm fishing at about 9 foot, so dragging bottom by a foot or two, and the float is fractionally undershotted so that if it drags it won't pull under. But that's what I need to do just to try and hold the rig in place, as I was saying. And it also gives you a really long, nice drop through the water, through plenty of depth, if the fish come to that loose feed and start feeding and competing higher up in the water. That would be a nice stage to get to, just to get a bite or two and a fish or two would be nice after so long. I'm a bit rusty at this type of fishing, but the wind's not too bad. It's a bit into my face, but blowing right along and towards the dam wall as usual as well. Oh, and it's funny how you can be away from somewhere for so long and yet feel completely at home as soon as you come back. And you know, I've come for the odd walk around here with family and friends over the years, and I've looked at it wistfully, but as I was saying, I'm usually fishing matches when I'm up in Sheffield and don't always have spare time to fit another fishing trip in. But yeah, drove up from Guildford last night, about 4 hours or so. Stayed at Dad's, had a couple of beers, had a catch up with Dad. And then it feels surreal to be back here, but also so familiar and warm. Keep that bait going in little and often. See whether you can provoke a response from the fish. They're not always in front of you like they would be in a modern commercial fishery. Oh, but what surroundings. The noise of the water lapping the shore. And it really took me back when I walked past the boathouse. We call this the boathouse stretch. This is where a lot of the matches used to be fished back in the day, and maybe they still are, I don't know. But walking past the boathouse and hearing the clanging and the knocking of the ropes on the sailing boat masts, that really took me back. Many happy days and some very cold, difficult, wet days at DAMFLASK over the years. Really having to punch that waggler out through the wind, sink the line really well and keep the rod tip down. And I really have only got the hemp, and you know, if I'm starting to see any roach action, I'm going to feed very sparingly until I can sound it out. I think one of the things that makes this place so special, apart from the obvious beauty of it, is the satisfaction you get from working it out, from consistently feeding and getting your rig right, fishing nice and fine. It's hugely satisfying when you get your first bite and your first fish, even if it's a small roach or perch. It's what I call proper fishing. And tomorrow I will love bagging at Springvale, catching lots of silvers and carp and tench. It's a brilliant fishery, and I'll have a whale of a time there as well. I love catching fish as much as the next angler, but I think this is a really special place for people like me and Andy and anyone who knows it well, because it really is wild, traditional fishing before the commercials sprang up. You know, this was all we knew. And along with rivers like the Trent, they really were where we learnt to try and use watercraft, read the day, the conditions, the swim or peg that you'd picked or had been given in a match, and make the most of it no matter how tricky it was. Sometimes you could win a section on a big match with just a few ounces, a really bad day. And it made any exceptional catches, like the time I watched an experienced angler catching some really big roach from here with wasp grubs, or wasp grubs as we say in Sheffield. I mean, that was just such an exceptional thing to see on such a difficult water. You know, £1+, £1.5 roach come to his quiver tip fished bait. They really stick in your memory. You know, it wasn't common to see several keep nets in the water with hundreds of pounds of fish in. It was an exception. Could have had a tiny dip then. And there are some huge pike in here being caught over the years. It's famous for its pike. In fact, it could be a real pain when you're fishing a match and you'd lose a nice skimmer or roach to a pike on the way back in. They learnt to sit on the shelf, and they probably still do. Grab the fish that came over. You normally get bussed off within a second using such light gear. Certainly teaches you to feed accurately as well when this crosswind keeps getting up and then dropping down. Sometimes you really have to pull the elastic back and fire it into the wind to get it anywhere near the flow. Other times when it's dropped like this, just a little flick will reach. And I think that's one of the things I was taught as a young lad, was how important feeding is in terms of attracting fish, getting the fish to feed, getting the fish ideally to compete and lose their natural wariness even in such clear water. And it's really served me well down the years. And I can reach the float there with a little flick. Another 5 minutes, it'll be blasting down again. But this really is a tame day compared to some of the sessions I've enjoyed over the years. Just desperate for your dad to come and pick you up, couldn't feel your hands, were waiting at the bus stop to get the bus back. You know you're a keen angler when you've enjoyed days like that. It really was nostalgic to stop at the old lodge up near the dam wall and use the old parking ticket machine to get a fishing ticket, a day ticket. £6, really good value. Okay, you're not fishing for a densely stocked head of fish that are going to guarantee bites all day, but to come and sit with such magnificent views as this for £6, I think's a bargain. But you must remember your coins. You need individual coins to pay at the machine still. It's not quite caught up with the 21st century, but there's something nice about that. So many memories and stories of this place. They used to stock it with trout many years ago, and on top of the tricky roach and perch fishing, you'd sometimes come up here and absolutely fill your boots with big hard fighting rainbows. They'd often crack us off, but sometimes we learnt to fish for them more specifically. We'd use big bright orange bubble floats and launch them off the dam wall with a worm, just fishing about a foot or two deep. Just wait for that big orange bubble to get dragged under. That wasn't finesse fishing, but it was great fun. And yeah, I do strongly remember being gathered together with all the parents and the coaches by the clubhouse, by the boathouse rather, and the list of names being read out who'd qualified to join the squad that year. And me and Andy were amongst those names read out by Jim Baxter. And they were far better anglers than us. So we were pretty lucky, but we fished all right on the day, caught a few fish. And it was enough to convince our elders. So yeah, lots of practice sessions and open matches fished beyond that special day. And I think it's watching other anglers fish better than you that really teaches you the most. There was no YouTube back then, but you'd go and sit behind some of the blokes who were fishing the opens if you were having a really bad match, couldn't catch anything, see what they were doing and try and copy them next time. And again, being from Sheffield, most of them were very friendly and happy to help. People like Andy's uncle. So if you have read the book, and I know many of you have, thanks very much for your custom, but I hope seeing this place might help bring it to life even more, and why it's so special. And we have got one. That is a very nice feeling. Very nice feeling to see the float go under and feel the little jagging resistance of a small, whoa, perch, who nearly went straight back in. Oh, there he is. Now that, my friends, may be a tiddler, a little perch of an ounce or two, but that is a typical first fish from the flask when you've been working at it for an hour or two like I have. You're just about to give up, back he goes, just about to not give up but start losing the faith, and that float suddenly isn't there anymore, and you strike hopefully rather than expectantly, and bunk bunk bunk, you've got a little fish on. And that is a brilliant feeling after keeping the faith, keeping the feed going in, cast after cast, and they are quite often the first fish to show up and respond to that bait. Whether there'll be any more, whether any silverfish will join it, remains to be seen, but great feeling to get off the mark. It really is blowing a gale now. And I think working really hard to catch little fish like that tiny perch is what's given me my lifelong appreciation of all kinds of fish, all shapes and sizes. They don't have to be big ones to put a smile on my face. And it really wasn't uncommon for a few fish like that to get you a section win or even a place in the frame on a hard, perhaps cold day at the flask when it really wasn't fishing well. So yeah, it's working at it and really having to try and unlock the puzzle that gives you appreciation for fish of all shapes and sizes. Certainly does for me. Well, it's now getting on for tea time, as we say in these parts, and the rowers are out from the club. But the fishing has proved just as rock hard as it always used to be, or could often be, should I say. Top anglers on here who really know the venue well can still come here and bag, I'm sure. The likes of Jamie Harrison, Fishing Feeder, and it would have been very interesting to have brought a feeder rod today, or even a little bomb rod, giving it a go, because there is a lot of tow on the water with this wind. But I've just had a good hour-long visit from my mate Andy, who finished work and came along to have a chat, and we've been reminiscing about all the hard days we'd had on here down the years as much younger men, and it wasn't uncommon to really struggle for bites. We both agreed that the tow, this really steady wind that is only on the lake, you know, he said there's nothing like this kind of wind back in Sheffield. So it's, you know, it's one of these huge reservoirs that generates its own weather systems and its own wind, and that does mean the rig's going through pretty fast. There's a lot of tow to take the feed a long way downwind, as it were, nearly said downstream, and it does feel a bit like fishing a river at times with the pace of the tow. But we tried lots of things. It was great to have a mate to bounce ideas off, and I tried fishing shallower, see if the fish were up in the water, even though I'm on the drop and hadn't had any indications on the drop. Gave it a go, a good 2 or 3 foot off the bottom. We gave it a go closer in where the small perch sometimes hang out, and I also tried casting further down, you know, wondering whether the bait was actually reaching the bottom a lot further down than I imagined. So we had a good few chucks further down to the left, and that one small perch has remained the only fish of the afternoon so far. So with my dad waiting at home and a match to fish tomorrow, I'll probably give it another hour or two and just hope that this wind does ease off, as it often used to do in the early evenings at the Flask. But I will keep persevering and see whether we can manage 1 or 2 more fish before home time. If not, I can only apologise for the lack of action in this, lack of fish action in this week's video. But I really have given it my best shot, and it's just one of those wild natural venues where if you're not on the fish, it can take some real doing to find them. The ducks certainly are hungry. Well, it's been one of those days. Like so many of my youth on the Flask, tricky. At least I've not been water-licked. I had that one tiny perch, but man, that took me back to lots of days on here struggling to find the fish. It may be that this persistent wind and the tow that it created made things tricky, but sometimes you're just not on the fish on a big natural venue such as this. It would have been interesting if I'd have had a tip rod and could have tried a static bait. It really was hard to keep the rig in one place with so much tow on, and even fishing way over depth, it was pulling through quite fast. So if you're a local who knows it well and you've been fishing it recently, drop me a comment, let me know how it's been fishing and how you would have approached it today. It's a magnificent venue that is full of fish, and there are plenty who catch here regularly, but I've not managed it today. I'm not complaining. I am sorry that I've not brought you a bit more fish catching action, but I hope the majestic scenery has made up for that, and it's lovely being able to share somewhere so special to me with you folks at home. Time to go home, see Dad, and prepare for the match tomorrow. I'm sure I'm going to get plenty more bites at Springvale. It's a prolific commercial venue, and I'm looking forward to catching a few. But until next time, do take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon on the bank.